Welcome and good evening, everybody. My name is Phil Edwards and I'm your webinar moderator tonight for the second webinar for the Bellarine Ward candidates. Welcome to this Community Candidates webinar, hosted and funded by the combined Bellarine Community Associations to provide an opportunity for community members to listen to the candidates from the Bellarine Ward Council, the Bellarine Ward for the council elections in a COVID-safe gathering. As we start, given the sort of weather that's occurring outside, just a quick rundown for attendees and candidates for a short contingency plan. If in the event we lose power, we'll try and get up over the 15 minutes from when we lose power. Attendees and candidates will need to reconnect. If we're not up by 15 minutes, then we'll reschedule for next week with more than likely a target of Thursday next week at 7 p.m. But hopefully the weather will be kind and we won't need that. Could I welcome Sandy Gatehouse from the Barwon Heads Association, Anne O'Connor from the Breamlea Association, Laurie Muscat from the Point Lonsdale Civic Association, and I'm from the Ocean Grove Community Association. I would like to begin tonight's webinar by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we live today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples attending tonight, regardless of where they currently join us from. Of the 10 candidates standing for the Bellarine Ward, 9 have joined us in tonight's webinar, and we welcome them all. Naomi Adams sends her apologies due to work and family commitments. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted on the various community association websites in about 2 days' time. We've decided not to live stream from YouTube, as the Zoom YouTube channel quality is not as good as we would have expected. I'll repeat the procedures from Monday night. The candidates are all aware of it. This is their second session, but for all the attendees, just so you understand. Candidates have been asked not to interject when another candidate is speaking, and candidates will mute their microphones when not speaking to avoid background noises and potential Zoom embarrassing moments. In the first part of the webinar, each candidate will have 5 minutes to speak, and we'll hear a 4-minute bell. If at the 5-minute mark the candidate is still speaking, their microphone will be muted by me. This ensures all candidates have equal time. All candidates were provided with 6 questions last week and were encouraged to talk to all or some of those questions during their 5 minutes, should they choose to do so. You, the attendees, can type in questions for the candidates at any time during the webinar, starting now by using the Q&A on your toolbar. You can thumbs up a question if you like someone else's question. Keep your questions clear, keep them short, and please make sure it's a question. In the second part of the webinar, I'll select from this bank of questions and will offer each candidate the opportunity to speak to the question with a 1-minute time limit. At the 1-minute time limit point, I'll mute the candidate's microphone and move on to the next nominated candidate. Candidates can pass on a question if they do not want to say anything, and they don't have to consume their minute. Please be aware that the Local Government Act places limitations on all candidates and on them subsequently if they are successful in becoming councillors, on making detailed comment on their detailed position or voting intention on a particular issue. Generally, this is in relation to a planning matter. A candidate can express their support to, say, the Bellarine Dowell and permanent settlement boundaries, but should not comment on exactly, for example, where a boundary should lie. This is a limitation placed on them by the Local Government Act. It's not a situation of their making. Please bear that in mind when asking questions through the Q&A function. At any time, offensive or inappropriate questions will be dismissed. At any time during the webinar, candidates and attendees can be removed by the webinar moderator, myself, or by my co-host. At the end of the webinar, each candidate will have 1 minute to sum up. Okay, let's begin. And the first candidate is Tom Harrison. Thank you, Tom.
G'day, Phil, and good to see you all again tonight. Thank you for putting on this this wonderful event. It was very good the other night, and hopefully tonight will be just as good, if not better. So, but I'll get stuck right in. My name's Tom Harrison. I'm 22 years old, and I reside in Clifton Springs. I'm a keen sports person, and work at a local golf club down here on the Bellarine. And I've been playing golf down here on the Bellarine for quite some time, since being a teenager, and have had multiple opportunities to meet many Bellarine locals out on the golf course, and get to know a lot of the people down here on the Bellarine that play golf. So that's been fantastic, and I've been a youth leader in the Geelong region since 2017. I've decided to run for council because I love where I live. I think the Ballarine's a terrific place. I think it's a wonderful place to live, a great place to visit, and I'm just very keen to make a positive contribution to our great community. Campaigning for this election has been a bit of a learning curve, to say the least, and it's given me the opportunity to reflect on what constituents really want and expect from their council. I think it's fair to say we all want our rubbish collected and potholes filled, but council needs to be much more than that. We need a council that innovates. Council will face many challenges in the face of a post-COVID recovery. Part of these challenges is having a clear plan for any state or federal government stimulus funding. Council needs to embrace opportunities to support local business recovery and to attract new business to the region. I believe the way forward to ensure that the community gets what it wants and needs is through consultation. I want my being elected to council to be the beginning of, I suppose, an ongoing dialogue between the community. So in short, I wish to be Ballarine's community voice on council. So I absolutely look forward to representing the wonderful ward and people of the Bellarine. And in my 5 minutes, I'll address some of these questions, as many as I can. So skills I possess for being a good councillor down here on the Bellarine. I'm approachable and relatable. I have good people skills and have had extensive experience building relationships with people of all walks and ages of life. I'm friendly, personable, and have a real passion for the community and a passion for making a contribution to our wonderful community. The next question refers to the distinctive areas and landscape statements, and my understanding is that there is an emphasis on land use and town boundaries, and as a councillor, I want to support the community in that land use is appropriate and any development fits within the amenity of the area. The next question is about the Bellarine having 1/5 of the city's residents and ensuring that the Bellarine receives its fair share of the council's $460 million budget. Yeah, so I think what's important to note in that particularly is that it refers to Bellarine as 50,000 voters. Yeah, 50,000 voters, but really what you've got to consider is the tourist population too. So not that I know off the top of my head, but it wouldn't surprise me if the population doubles in tourist season with tourists coming down. And I think it's important that we secure enough funding to support that many and not just the 50,000 that live here, because we don't want it to take an hour and a half to get from, I don't know, St. Leonards to Clifton Springs, for example, or to Barwon Heads from Clifton Springs. Another question is about, about the register. I would look favourably upon the proposal of a public register to record all meetings between property developers, council management and councillors. Key actions for climate change and rising sea levels. I think the council need to have an understanding of the likely projected impacts. I think once there is an understanding of like I just said, the likely projected impacts, council can then implement a strategy that's most suitable to that, and go from there. And in regards to infrastructure lacking, the key to the question is about what the community wants. I look forward to consulting with the community, finding out whether it be footpaths or
Thanks, Tom. We hit the 5-minute wall. Steve Simmons, please.
I feel the character and beauty of the Bellarine Peninsula will be lost if development is not slowed significantly, so as to allow time for infrastructure to catch up and to allow more considered planning. We need urgent action on climate change, not just for the sake of our children's future, but just because it makes economic sense. I don't want to just become part of the decision-making system. I want to bring change to the whole system. The system's clearly broken, and I want to be a fresh voice with fresh ideas. A public register to show meetings between council and lobby groups is a high priority for me, as is true accountability for decision-making. I'd like to see the sale yards reinstated in a new location as a full service facility, and priority given to a motocross track to return to the region. Both should never have been neglected or forced to leave in the first place, and our community is poorer for their absence. We need a more needs and evidence-based approach to decision-making. The location and size of pools, libraries, and the like should be decided on measurable things, such as current facilities, population densities, and the distance to alternatives, rather than who's the best advocate or the loudest advocate, or who just controls the numbers in council. Further, in growth areas, I think developers should be more responsible for the required community infrastructure, not just within their development site, but in the whole area in which their development affects as well as benefits from. I've always believed parking should be free, but with timed enforcement, and I'll advocate for this strongly. We need more off-leash dog areas and an ongoing program to build and renovate family play spaces. Library services and community hubs should be constantly expanding and improving in our growing region, not disappearing. I want permanent unlimited hard waste collection for residents and lower tip fees, and we need to push harder for NBN equality if we are to ever become a smart, innovative city. I believe that many of our current community concerns have been caused directly by short-term thinking, various party political interests, or just plain old-fashioned thinking. I think we need some new faces and new ideas to steady the ship and to change course. Previous and existing councillors will all say, but they bring in experience. And on that, I'll make two observations. Firstly, it is their experience that has got us here in the first place. And secondly, that would make a dictator the most qualified for the job. The reality is elected councillors should be a broad range of community-minded individuals with a shared goal to make decisions on behalf of the whole community, for the benefit of the community. The community is ever changing, and so should the decision makers. Let's shake things up a bit and vote for a whole fresh new crew. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. We'll move on now with Stephanie Asher, please.
I actually thought it was Trent next. Phil?
You trying to skip over me, Phil?
No, I won't skip over. You're right. No, it's Trent next one. I shouldn't have sent the text telling you all the sequence earlier. So Trent Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Phil. And thank you once again to the combined Bellarine Associations for having us all for panel number 2. Bellarine residents deserve more services and infrastructure. That much is clear. As your representative for the last 3 years, I've delivered funding for, a new pool, childcare centres, sporting reserves, community hubs, school safety upgrades, senior citizen centres, new playgrounds, streetscapes, and I'll always keep funding for more because the job is never done. I worked hard to lock in the town boundaries back in 2018. Task of vital importance. The theme keeps coming up again: town boundaries, our green breaks. From a local government perspective, we've locked them in. Now we have to work with state government to make sure that distinctive areas and landscape projects adheres to what the community wants. We actually listen to. We've heard in other projects that the community didn't get what they were exactly expecting. So we have to make sure that we have people in place here who know the planning process, who know what's happened so far, and who know how to get where we want to go to. So I'm very passionate about that. Another common theme, that Bellarine does not see its fair share of funding as opposed to other Geelong City Council wards. As much is clear, we are always working to try to rectify that. 3 new councils last time, we can always say that fresh ideas and new faces is great, but as 3 fresh faces last time, we can say with absolute experience that we were blindsided by a woeful process. And it took us a good year or so to be able to rectify ourselves, to understand, to get our minds really into how the public sector works, because it is very different from the private sector. Anybody who has made that transition will agree. So we need to make sure, okay, so the City of Greater Geelong it has an annual budget of $450 million, $2.5 billion worth of assets. We need people who have financial know-how. In the next, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years coming out of COVID, we need to be able to allocate our resources in the appropriate manner that we can help recover, have our economy recover and local businesses and community recover without sacrificing basic community infrastructure. The services that council is necessary to provide. And there's over 120 council services. So we can't just drop off the map there. These are things we have to keep going, Meals on Wheels, etc. There's so many important things that council provides, which people off the top of their heads don't think that's something that we actually do, but we're there. Road safety, road shoulders, maintenance, upgrades, potholes, everything like that. As we develop as a city, we're expanding to new areas, but we cannot forget the core duties of council. They are what we're there for. That's why we serve at the pleasure of the state government. Funding for local events and tourism in the industry is very passionate. I'm very passionate about that. I was very fortunate enough to be able to advocate to get money for them during this time. I came into the portfolios of tourism and events, arts, culture and heritage just over a year ago, just before COVID struck. So I'm very proud to have been advocating on these industries apart from them. That comes from everything from cutting red tape, permit refunds, to grants, skills, opportunities, training. There's so much to do, but there's so much more that we have to do as well. Funding for employment skills and opportunities. We need to be clever and creative about our future. We all live in the Bellarine for what it has to offer. It's a beautiful place, but we can increase our opportunities and support right here without sacrificing everything that we already have. What makes the Bellarine special? I'm very passionate about protecting our environment, bringing sustainability to all, or to the core of every single council decision making process. That's what the sustainability framework is there for. So that it's never forgotten. It's included in everything that we do. It was my amendment to C395, which taken into account the rising sea tides, combating that. I was very proud that that got passed by the state as well. I'm proud to be a part of a council that voted and implemented initiatives such as operating on 100% renewable energy, changing our street light globes. That's that's going to be a $10, $50 million process. By reducing all of our street globes by municipality to LED efficient, that reduces thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of carbon emission into the atmosphere each year. But first and foremost, the community must always come first in council decision making. And as councils, we are always accessible, and that's one of the core skills that we have to have. I will never vote on a piece of motion or anything unless we have community consultation on it, because if we forget that we are the voice of the people, and for it to be that you have to hear the voice of the people first of all, then the system isn't working. So I'm very proud to be served on the council for the last 3 years. I wish to do another 3 years because the job is never done. There's always so much more you want to do. And I'll always fight for this community down here.
Thanks, Trent. Stephanie Asher, please.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you to the combined Bellarine Community Associations for organising this, and to all the candidates for joining in, and for everybody in the audience as well. It's a really great effort. Thank you. I was honoured to be elected in 2017 and to be the first Bellarine-based Mayor of Greater Geelong as well. And my priority is continuing to listen to the local voices and help people with council issues. My passion is about improving the professional standards and promoting clear and honest communication from council. That's been something that hasn't really come through that strongly. Local people tell me that they want their rates spent on shared trails, on swimming pools, arts venues, libraries, decent roads and local streetscapes. We also all want our peninsula protected and developed in a respectful and sustainable way. And I led unanimous council support for prioritising climate change action and considering sustainability right across all the activities in the organisation. And critically for the Bellarine, our council also endorsed the settlement strategy in 2020, which limits or stops new residential developments outside those defined town boundaries. As an active resident of Ocean Grove for the past 2 decades, I've been Vice President of the Surf Club. I've spent a few years on both the board of the Community Association and the Ocean Grove Connected Communities. I also did my tour of duty as a kinder committee parent for all 3 kids. From a social perspective, I've also been a board member of both Bethany and the Kids Plus Foundation, and a board member of the Committee for Geelong and chair of their leadership subcommittee. Environmentally speaking, I'm a former director of the Barwon Regional Waste Management Group, and I spent several years as a volunteer green home champion for the Australian Conservation Foundation, focusing on facilitating sessions on how to live more sustainably. Professionally, I'm a CEO of a management consultancy, and I consult to both private, not-for-profit and public sector organisations specialising in sustainability strategy and public reporting, including audits on environmental performance. I've now had 3 years as a councillor and as mayor, and I feel like we're making really good progress. We have some incredible opportunities as we face the challenges coming out of COVID, and I believe I bring some very useful skills and a whole lot of energy to the table as a councillor. Communication and engagement is key to what I do as an old PR hack, as is media relations and experience in that field. I'm also pretty well qualified with facilitation and chairing, and of course the sustainability experience and environmental performance reporting. With regard to the other questions, the DEL process needs ongoing input and engagement from the community and the council. I think it's been mentioned, the boundaries and the land management are the key issues there. It's critical for this region to make sure that that process continues. Sea level rise has also actually already been acknowledged by the council with the C394 land inundation overlay, which actually helps the community into the future. So the council is actually across this stuff already. Climate change also is front and centre priority number 1 in the Sustainability Action Plan. The Climate Response Plan is something that can be developed with great input from the community coming into later this year. Transparency of decision making is also very critical, and I do support the register, and I did support that in the chamber as well. And working with other councillors is really important to getting that fair share of the budget. It's also about knowing the process and negotiating with the other councillors from the other wards to make sure that the Bellarine gets the rightful amounts. I'll also, if re-elected, continue to push for that bigger share of the city's budget, because we've been fairly underdone in the last decade or so. I'll also work hard to protect our unique townships, drive the North Bellarine Pool project, and also create those trail links and paths that are so desperately needed. Involve local expertise in these sorts of things as well, and maybe also make sure that we set higher organisational performance targets. The Sustainability Action Plan is a really critical piece of work that affects how the city operates, and potentially also how we all work and live, not just on the Bellarine and Greater Geelong, and we can take a real leadership stance with this one. The organisation isn't very mature when it comes to this sort of thing, so they do need a bit of help. And while councillors don't direct operations and can't direct operations, we can shape policy and action. And the first step is about involving the community and using that local knowledge and passion. And the organisation itself also needs to skill up, and they are doing that, and raise the bar on sustainability strategy, communication and performance reporting. There are a few other important things that need to continue to make sure that the Bellarine community in particular doesn't slide back into insignificance and being left out of the budget. As I said, the North Bellarine Pool project needs constant pressure to ensure that it eventuates, as does the Shared Trails project and the approach to rural and peri-urban issues as well. I really like to get things done, and I believe as community representatives, the councillors need to push hard for better output from the city, for higher targets for environmental performance in particular, and to speed up processes that are just too slow. I've really enjoyed the role, and I would be honoured to continue speaking up for the Bellarine. Thank you. You're on mute, Phil.
Phil, you're on mute still.
Michael, Fairweather, your turn. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Fairweather, and I'd like to start with an acknowledgement to country and offer my respect to the Wathaurong people, past and present. I moved back to this area about 14 years ago, and I'm now living at Portarlington and enjoying it immensely. But I originally started in the early 50s when my parents moved here, or my father especially, for work, and lived in York Street in Geelong West. And in my early working career, I actually worked for Stocks and Holdings and was selling land at the Surfside Estate in Ocean Grove on the first and second releases before I moved elsewhere. I've always tried to be community oriented in everything I do. When I started as a teen, I was involved in the administration of my chosen sport. I've always tried to get involved in committees or in the running of whatever I've tried to do, including my own businesses. I was both on Sandringham and Brighton yacht clubs. I was a bail justice for 15 years and still a Justice of the Peace, and served on the board of the Honorary Justice Association. Now in my semi-retirement, I'm on the committee for the Malloy Society, which is the bequest arm of the Barwon Health Foundation. I know how committees do and don't work, and I hope that change can come eventually to Geelong Council. Whether it's in the northern or southern Bellarine, it's exactly the same. To that community consultation should take place in the decision making, and transparency in these decisions is the most important thing. It shows respect for the community that you're serving. Planning, frankly, has been quite a bit of a disgrace as far as I'm concerned. As a builder, I can attest to that, especially in the housing sector. There's not enough consultation with the people, and it's all taking too long. So I'd like to take a keen interest in that and make sure that it's addressed and that it's not just pure rhetoric that's spoken from council. I would also like to make sure that the councillors, as we've got 3 of us down in this ward, consult with the community and reflect the community's views, and hopefully not have Geelong-centric decision making, leaving that Bellarine a poor ward on the outer. Transparency within council is a must, as the ratepayers are the ones that are affected by these decisions and should be able to view them openly. For us on the Bellarine, climate change is also a special issue, especially with rising seawaters. It's a huge problem that's not only just a local council issue, but state and federal, and a strong voice from council hopefully can sway the deniers of climate change. On the question of footpaths, Stephanie the other night couldn't have put it any better. One for yes and one for no. Me personally, I'm a no. But there are places that there should be safe footpaths, and it's a must that these all should be provided by council. In residential areas, it should be a shared cost with the residents, the way it always has been. Usually people don't like to have to pay that cost, but if they want it, that's what they have to do. Community infrastructure also. It's taking place slowly, but that's also because of the amount of rates we get. The walking tracks, the parks and the sporting facilities, they are being upgraded, even though slowly, but it'll all happen. Social safety is probably one of the largest things. The policing down our end of the world isn't the best, and we need to improve that, and we can do that with a voice to the police. Finally, I'd like to wish everyone and all the candidates good luck. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Michael. Corey Wolverton, please.
Yep. Thank you again for having me, all community associations, and thanks for running tonight. Begin with acknowledgement to country. I'd like to acknowledge the Warrawong people on the land on which we are meeting tonight, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. And this is stolen land, and it was never ceded, and we need to work towards reconciliation with all First Nations people. So I'll just begin a bit about myself, that I grew up in, I guess, a farming kind of area, working on mostly with livestock and cattle, bit of fruit picking. And then I became a chef, and I worked in kitchens for about 10 years, so a lot of hospitality. during that time, I did a Bachelor of Social Work, and now I'm a social worker and a specialist child and family practitioner, and I also have a graduate certificate in politics and policy, so both at Deakin. I'm a father. I've got 2 little kids, and I live in Ocean Grove. So I want to see in council, I want to see stronger action on in the climate emergency. I want to see it not just within council. I want to see it in the community as well. And I want to see renewables incentivised in the community. I want a tree planting program that meets its targets. I want to be ambitious about that. I want to see it not in 10 years. I want to see 1 million trees in 4 years. Another great way, obviously, that we can mitigate climate change is by having active travel, shared bike paths, walking trails, and more safer walking paths for people around the Bellarine in urban areas and in more rural areas as well. On town boundaries, it's something that I think that everyone is pretty focused on, and a lot of the questions that we have been receiving about that, people I think just want assurance that it's not going to continue to eat into the rural land, because the rural coastal landscape is what I think we all love about the Bellarine. It's why I enjoy it. I enjoy surfing as well, but you know, it's beautiful down here, so that's why we live here. So we don't want to see developers turn up, make their money, and then piss off with that money while we're left with no infrastructure and no environment. So, you know, we want to care for the existing native vegetation and keep it beautiful. Another real passion for mine is obviously social services, and community wellbeing. So being a social worker, that's super important to me, and I guess men's wellbeing is something that I'm passionate about, and so is and young people's wellbeing as well. So I helped develop a men's wellbeing program in Curlewis, where men can come and get fit, have something to eat, and have a chat about anything. It doesn't have to be mental health; it can be anything. So that ran at the start of this year, and then COVID stopped it, just like everything else. We hope we can run it again next year. But as well, in my job, I see a lot of young people that are feeling pretty disconnected, feeling not really engaged in school, whether it's study or work, family and social breakdown. And so, you know, providing support for young people as well is going to be super important, especially coming out of COVID. In a COVID recovery, young people are being hit pretty hard, particularly in hospitality, arts, music. I played in bands for the last 10 or 15 years, so I love a bit of live music, and you know, those people are hurting, and that's where a lot of my social interactions happen, is through music. So and work as well in hospitality, and these are the places that have been hit hardest. So supporting these places, particularly in the Bellarine and in Geelong, that we, you know, allow our fresco dining, and we find innovative ways to make sure that these people can keep making money, but it's also the social interaction at the end of the day that is super important. On waste, I think 2030 is probably too long to have a waste program that takes in food waste. That's got to happen far sooner. I know if all the candidates here heard me probably go on about the 35 to 40% mark of how much of the waste is food waste.
Corey, thank you. And Tom O'Connor. Tom, please. We know your video is not working, but you need to unmute. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. That's probably a blessing in disguise. I'm a country boy, born and raised in Swan Hill, and this was the journey that the folks used to take and bring us on every year at Christmas time. We'd come down to here for our summer holidays. And some 40 plus years ago, we settled in Drysdale, 25 acres, built our own home, raised a family of 4. I've background skills in quantity surveying. I'm a quantity surveyor. I then moved into business, operating my own businesses, and more recently in project management. Council-wise, when I moved here many years ago, my first experience was with the Shire of Bellarine, and there was a great relationship, and if there were any differences of opinion, you sorted them out. You didn't have to go to VCAT. In 1993, when councils were amalgamated, and we fast forward to today, the relationship between council and community they're vastly different, and they're vastly different for a couple of reasons. One is to handle the integration, and also to handle the growth. The growth, I think, as Tom Harrison said before, you look at where we are today, 55,000, the doubles during the holiday period. That's some of the backstory. In the past 16 years, I was a councillor in 2004 to 2008, and since then I've been a full-time active community advocate, And as I see it, the challenge that we've got ahead of us now as a consequence of amalgamation and growth is we've got to rebuild and reconnect our communities, and as importantly, reconnect our communities with council. And one of the game breakers we've got in the system is the new Local Government Act. It's an act that's descriptive rather than prescriptive. It doesn't tell you what to do. It describes and leaves it up to how we interpret it. And I say that deliberately. The key principles, one of the key principles focuses on community engagement, a significant change where the community have a much greater, they're encouraged to have a far greater input to where we're going. And then you couple that with the service performance, another one of the principles in this Local Government Act. They talk about the opportunity for community and others to co-invest with council in private-public partnerships or boot-type schemes. Those are ever more relevant when we look at the post-COVID crisis and within the federal government budget. The need for this co-investment and the need for reconnection our communities to council is all the more necessary. We as a community, we've got to become far more proactive and far less reactive than we've ever been. The new Government Act will give us that opportunity to demonstrate our involvement with our community rather than leave it to others. This will ensure we've got an opportunity to shape our future. There's 3 steps I'm proposing to undertake as a councillor, and they're all based around the individuality of our townships, the uniqueness, the marine, the coastal, the urban and the rural elements are significantly different to anything else in the Shire of Bellarine, in the Shire, dare I say, the greater city of Geelong. The first one is the visions and the mission for our townships. We've got to address those far more than we've ever done before, along with the relationships to the marine, to the coastal and the rural elements. We've got to take that on board, and I'll take that on board with my fellow councillors. As part of that, the next step will be to develop the priorities, develop the partners, and develop.
Tom, thank you. That's your 5-minute run. Elise Wilkinson. Elise, please.
Hello and thank you. I acknowledge that we are meeting on the land of the Wadawurrung people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal people zooming in. I've worked as a social worker in the community, government and in public health in Geelong for the last 19 years. I'm a powerful advocate and effective communicator with good listening skills and strong networks. I live in Barwon Heads with my partner and 2 teenage children. Local government has a significant role to play in making decisions that affect the social and physical environment. Through my work, I see the impact of this in turn and that it has on enhancing the health and well-being of people. Health professionals are already seeing the impact of climate change on people's physical and mental health. And so I stand as an independent as part of an all-female alliance to put climate first in all decision-making processes of council. The Bellarine region is particularly vulnerable to the impact of climate change. Sustained population growth and development can place pressure on the environment. Results from the recent Geelong Community Survey provide a clear message that residents in the Bellarine want action on climate crisis and do not believe enough is being done to address these concerns. The sustainability framework lacks urgency. We need a whole organisational response from council with scientific targets and comparative benchmarking against other like councils to measure progress. One goal that should be targeted is zero net carbon emissions by 2030. If elected, I would advocate for an action response commensurate with the crisis we're facing. We need an all-in response to engage, inform and allow access to affordable ways to shift to renewables, manage energy use, increase localised food production, waste management and public and active transport options and use. I would advocate for prioritised funding within council and to review access to state and federal funding opportunities such as the new $790 million Recycling Modernisation Fund. The greatest barrier to change is often the perception that it's unaffordable. However, we can no longer afford to subsidise the fossil fuel industry as it has no viable economic future. It is the role of council to invest, educate and lead in this area at the local level for the community without party politics vested interests. A shift to renewables will lead to greater job creation in all related industries over the long term. The state government has recognised the Bellarine region under the distinctive areas and landscapes for its beautiful coastal and marine environment, rural hinterland and wetlands. The Bellarine each has its individual character, each town, environment and heritage, and also share many common issues and challenges. The rezoning of agricultural for residential land is an issue that impacts everyone. As a councillor, I would stand for transparency and accountability in relation to planning processes and governance. I would support the creation of a public register to record meetings between developers and those representing council. Within the DEL process, I would advocate for the importance of community consultation and the need for a long-term vision to protect and enhance the unique environment while building our economy through tourism to the Bellarine. I'd work hard and advocate for bi-monthly face-to-face or Zoom meetings to ensure greater access to elected councillors for all residents. There are many examples where local councils are able to affect environmentally sensitive design in property development. There needs to be a move away from a reactive response for development where a small number of people make a large amount of money. Instead, I will push for a more visionary approach that puts climate mitigation and future-proofing at the centre of decision-making and benefits everyone. I will work to preserve town boundaries and green wedges between distinctive settlement towns, protect Indigenous vegetation, green biodiversity corridors, wetlands, and protect and enhance local food production and services. Pressures of urban development are common, and these will be felt differently depending on where you live. There are many issues: soil contamination, adequate sewage systems, stormwater flows into Ramsar wetlands, and the list goes on, and it will change over time. I want to see council lead by being adaptive and responsive. In many parts of the Bellarine, infrastructure has not kept up with development. Construction of footpaths and a comprehensive plan for improved bike paths and public transport across the Bellarine are key to enable access for travel for all people and reduce the dependency of cars. Community hubs such as libraries, neighbourhood centres and art centres are important in building community and a sense of belonging and connection, particularly as we emerge from social isolation. I would highlight the importance of affordable activities, and particularly for young people and older residents across the Bellarine, to improve mental and physical health outcomes. I've chosen to run for council to be part of the change I want to see. As a councillor, I'd be honoured to represent the people of the Bellarine Peninsula. As your elected representative on council, I know that together we can do more, we can do it differently, and we can do it better. Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. And Jim Mason, please. Jim.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks, Phil. First, I want to acknowledge that the Bellarine is on customary Wadawurrung country. I offer my respect to the traditional custodians, elders past, present and emerging, and any First Nation people that might be watching tonight. 3 years ago, I said I wanted to make a useful and lasting contribution to the City of Greater Geelong, its people, culture, economy and environment. I've achieved that aim in part. I've worked hard over the last 3 years, led 3 portfolios, been active on 18 council committees and rarely missed a meeting. I've built sound relationships and demonstrated resilience, integrity and stamina. I updated my governance skills by completing the high-level Australian Institute for Company Directors course. This complements my professional skill set in in international relations, humanitarian disaster recovery, civil engineering and environmental science teaching. I know and grew up on the Bellarine and have made a significant contribution to the natural environment and the community through my 8-year leadership of the Bellarine Land Care Group and ongoing membership of the Manaram CFA. I have a track record of assisting hundreds of Bellarine people, a track record of independence and mainstream progressive thought based on science and world's best practice, a track record of holding traditional labour values, social equity, the environment, local business, agriculture and community networks. I'll continue to put in and apply my skills because there's a lot more to do. I stood for and support a declaration of a climate emergency, restorative environmental management, a circular economy where reuse is designed into a product and where plastics and other materials are eliminated if they can't be recycled. Over my tenure, I was council representative on the Coastal Adaptation Committee and the Association of Bayside Municipalities. We now have planning rules for areas threatened by sea level rise. There's more to do, more community education and more to strengthen the climate and biodiversity policy targets. I support ethical, transparent governance. I will support the establishment of a public register of all meetings between property developers, city administration and councillors. And I stand for a culturally safe city and the Reconciliation Action Plan. I stand for the settlement strategy and the intent of DAL, which is to limit the future growth on the Bellarine, to control and define boundaries, to protect the rural landscapes and the character of the coastal and rural towns. This also means controlling building heights within these towns while allowing a moderate increase in housing diversity and density. And I'll ensure backlogs of flooding, footpath, dust and pothole problems are reviewed, prioritised or fixed. I'll support heritage, historical, art, film and literary groups, and I've already assisted many groups in grant submissions, including quite a number of sporting groups. I'll continue to collaborate constructively with my fellow ward councillors and all community associations to ensure a fair share of the budget. In unity there is strength, and we must work closely together. To work together for improved mental health, aged and childcare, for advancing the Bellarine link and diverting through traffic from the coastal towns, for the construction of shared trails between Ocean Grove and Drysdale, Point Lonsdale and Portarlington, and for restoring the natural environment and initiating the South East Bellarine Coastal Reserve Strategy, sustaining our precious wetlands, and for an early community review of the Ocean Grove and Barwon Heads sporting facilities, sharing community facilities, and finding a home for the Barwon Heads Scouts. Working together to ensure the Colindina Reserve and the Ocean Grove Cricket Club are upgraded. I will continue to work hard for the Bellarine and I'll not let you down. And I thank all candidates for participating tonight. and the Combined Association for organising this session.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you to all the candidates. Like Monday night, which you're all very skilled at, we're going into our 1-minute questions with rotating sequence of answers. The questions will be a combination of those that you see in the Q&A boxes and questions that were lodged earlier in the week or so past. All candidates should be able to see the questions anyway on the Q&A box, and we'll start with the top one at the moment there. How would you work collaboratively with your fellow councillors to achieve outcomes for the Bellarine? Jim Mason, please.
Thank you, Phil. How will I work collaboratively? As I think we have, and I think we've demonstrated that we've been quite effective over the last 3 years in achieving quite a few of our goals. And it's important to work together with the community associations and with the various sporting and cultural groups. We need to share information. We need to keep one another informed on whatever activities we're undertaking. Often there's someone might make a complaint and it's necessary to deal with it. It's necessary to keep your colleagues informed about what's going on and share that information. And everybody's on the same page. It's important to meet regularly and develop policies. When the communities are doing their grant applications, it's very important to.
Thanks, Jim. Steve Simmons, please.
I just think recognising everyone has their own opinion is important, and to respect that opinion. But obviously, if things got to get done, you have to agree on a way forward. So for the Bellarine, it's obviously important as ward councillors, but equally for the whole council in the city of Greater Geelong, it's equally important. Otherwise, the council just turns into a shambles like it did, 5 years ago, or whatever the previous council was. Not the most recent one, but the previous one. So, I mean, just common sense, really. I think I'm a fairly a people person, and I generally get on with people of all walks of life. That's it.
Thanks, Steve. And Tom Harrison, please.
No worries. Yeah, look, I've had wide experience interacting with people of all ages and walks of life. And I'm confident in my ability to work constructively and collaboratively with whomever the community elects to ensure the best outcomes for residents and ratepayers. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Phil.
Sorry. Tom O'Connor. Tom O'Connor, please.
Thanks, Phil. Phil, I think collaboratively with our colleagues, with the other two candidate councillors, I think it's important that we define the issues, carefully define the issues of concern right across the whole Bellarine, carefully define them, and then update progress on those issues so that we can then report back to the community. That builds a trust and respect, not only amongst ourselves as councillors, but also with the community. To me, that's fundamental. From a personal side, probably got to listen more and trust and respect our fellow colleagues and our community. They're the fundamentals. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Tom. And Corey Wolverton, please.
Yeah, I think that's it. Communication is key. Being respectful of where everyone else is coming from and working towards a common goal. But yeah, that communication between councillors is obviously super important. I think as a social worker, I hope that I'm a relatively good communicator, since I'm working with people all day. But yeah, I think that I could do that fairly successfully.
Thanks, Corey. And Trent Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Phil. Well, by the very nature of a multi-member ward as opposed to a single-member ward, by necessity, you have to work in a collaborative manner. During this last council, I've seen the differences of wards that do and do not work together. The 3 Bellarine ward councils, we've put in all of our budget submissions together. We have put up all of our major projects together, despite everybody having different views politically at a higher level. At a grassroots level, you have to work together. I've seen other wards where you may have 3 different members who do not work together, who actively work against each other to further their own interests. It doesn't work. That does not benefit the community. That's not what they're about. So it's all about looping each other in your emails, putting budget things together, submissions together, communications, and being part of a team. That's first and foremost for the community.
Thanks, Trent. And Michael Fairweather, please.
Thanks, Phil. For me, that's a bit of a no-brainer sort of question. As a builder, you've got to work with the client, the architect, the trades. Collaboration's what it's about. And in council, it's exactly the same thing. So if I'm lucky enough to be elected, it'll be working with the fellow councillors to make sure we get good outcomes for the Bellarine. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And Elise Wilkinson, please.
I think collaboration and respectful communication, listening, and putting the community's needs at the very front and centre. So even if the 3 of you have a slightly different take or a different interpretation, to really go back to the core business and the core reason, and those principles of respectful listening and being open to what the needs of the community are.
Thanks, Elise. Everyone's had a shot in that one. So the next question on Steph, didn't I? How did I do that? My apologies. Stephanie
That's
Asher,
right.
please.
I won't feel left out. I'll just feel lucky last. Everyone's pretty much said it anyway. It's that idea of working together. And I think both Jim and Trent have said it too, that the work we did together was always really collaborative and respectful. And it is about sharing information. It's about sharing emails, copying each other in, including each other. Sometimes one councillor won't necessarily be invited to something and you make sure that they are. Tag teaming on requests. Some people will think that only one councillor has actually responded, but what happens is it goes through the portal from one councillor, one of the Bellarine councillors. We might have all got it. We might have all done the same thing, but it'll be one person who's actually sort of seems like being the one who's responding, and you just go with that. Working together with weight of numbers on projects and budget bids and things like that's really critical too. And I do apologise for the motocross track out the front of my house. Someone's going up and down on a motorbike with noise in the background. And coffee catch-ups too. Keeping it really informal and fun and having a good time is really critical too. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. The next question is, how do you envisage protecting the coastline and fragile coastline areas from the massive increase in population that doesn't necessarily understand how vulnerable that environment is? If we could start with Tom O'Connor, please.
Thanks, Phil. One of the projects we've been working on for quite a while now is putting offshore reefs, probably a kilometre and a bit more offshore on the northern Bellarine, right around to St Leonards, offshore reefs to grow the flora and fauna, but also protect the coastline from sea level rise and also the ravages of storm. Another issue that I find intriguing is these groins that are stuck out at odd intervals, where all they serve to do is gather, and we've seen it again and again. All they seem to do is gather weed. I'd take action on that. I'm not quite sure what I'd do right this moment, but the massive increase in population, the vulnerability of the environment, it's...
Thanks, Tom. Stephanie Asher.
Thank you, Phil. Absolutely, this is part of the Climate Change Response Plan, which is the first cab off the rank out of the Sustainability Action Plan. And just bearing in mind, and I'll publicise this as much as possible, come November, there will be applications being sought for members of that Sustainability Committee. So committee members will be made up of community people and people with expertise to feed into that exact process and help to shape up the response to climate change. Also working with Barwon Coast and Bellarine Bayside, which is the state government bodies responsible for the coastal region and the foreshore. It's absolutely making sure that the council cooperates and collaborates with the work that they're doing as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. And Jim Mason, please.
Thank you, Phil. As Stephanie said, collaborate and coordinate with Bellarine Bayside and Barwon Coast. It's very important we do all work together. Education is a very important thing, and it was mentioned a booming population and a lot of newcomers. We do need to make sure that there's good education on all of the issues, the fragility of the area, the hooded plovers, the need, the properly communicated dog controls, etc. In addition to that, beach renourishment, etc., is an ongoing thing, and we need to continue to put the science into this because we still don't understand exactly how those ocean currents are working. But it all comes back to cooperation and community education. It's better to have people desire to look after it rather than force them to do so. Come back to education.
Thank you, Jim. Tom Harrison, please.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I definitely see that as a very important matter and issue. Along the lines of what Jim said, I think education is definitely plays a massive part of it. I absolutely recognise that it's an issue. What I envisage, how I envisage the protection, I can't really comment on. I'm not exactly sure what that might look like, but definitely open to consulting with all community members that are concerned about it, and I think it's an important matter. But I definitely think education, understanding the fragility of the areas, etc., would improve people's approach to how how it's treated. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And Trent Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Phil. Naturally, as stated, the beaches on the Bellarine are under control by the state bodies, Bellarine Bayside and the Barwon Community of Coastal Management. The largest thing going forward into protecting our coastlines will be the Bellarine distinctive areas and landscape. Working with the state government as it comes under the Planning and Environment Act of 1987 to install that. How can we best work in a collaborative manner to make sure we have the right planning and control and preventative measures in many aspects to cover our coastlines? Because I mean, the waterways, coastlines are what makes a healthy environment, especially in our area most of all. City's done great work in protecting our beaches, biodiversity, recreation, tourism, because it's all part and parcel. You can't just take one aspect of what we're doing because there's a flow-on effect, especially in areas such as ours. Work to protect the hooded plovers. Many coastal birds, animals live on our areas, and we need to do as much as possible to protect that. But the largest thing will be the DAL going forward.
Thanks, Trent. And Steve Simmons, please.
Well, I think it's just important to listen to the experts and explain the choices, because all of these things have choices, and I guess they also have consequences and costs. So, to do nothing, the cost is too great. So, pretty much listen to the experts and throw some money around.
Thanks, Steve. And Michael Fairweather.
On that question about the experts, they've had experts do everything down this end of the world, and everything that they've done seems to be a dismal failure. Somewhere in the world, there's an expert that knows exactly what should happen. Maybe they should ask some of the locals that have been here all their lives and seen it all happen before. Who knows? A lot of it is state government and federal government money that's thrown at it. I can remember when all the trucks were lined up and the sand got put down on the beach down here for re-nourishment. And the day they finished, the storm came through and took it all away, took it all to Indented Heads. It was amazing. I've been involved in a few projects like that over the other side of the bay, and I don't think anyone ever gets it right, unfortunately. It's just constant work and constant.
Thanks, Michael. Can I just check that everyone's had a shot at that question? Elise says, oh, I'm glad I checked. Thanks, Elise.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously the DEL process and engaging government for funding, but yeah, there's Barwon Coast, Bellarine Bayside, Bellarine Landcare, sustainability groups. There's so much incredible volunteer work and work being done in this space already. It's about educating, but it's all sort of all in response to education. So there's lots of different ways of doing that. You can do that through the multiple festivals we have that celebrate our connection with the sea, and through music, through art, and through the schools. So often it's actually this kind of information and knowledge comes from, you know, children challenging and questioning and informing their parents that may be new to the area as well. So yes, there needs to be investment and broader structural change and support, but there's also that grassroots movement that's already there. We just need to embrace it and collaborate with it.
Thanks, Elise. And Corey.
Cheers. Yeah, education, obviously, yeah, like Elise was saying, for locals, for kids, and for tourists that come down as well. Enforcement, staying out of the sand dunes, staying away from the puffers. Don't keep, don't let your dogs in the sand dunes. It's simple stuff to us that needs to be enforced. Working with community groups, offering grants, that kind of stuff is awesome. Tree planting, revegetation, just up the trees, more vegetation, keep it beautiful. Supporting studies. There's a study right now from Deakin down measuring the sand dunes. That stuff needs to be promoted. That takes community people getting out there and helping. And banning single-use plastics, get them out of our towns. Let's, as a community, we can say no, and we can ask shops to stop using them. And that's the best way to get plastics out of our beach, because I hate picking them up. I hate them. I hate when I paddle through water and it's in my hands and I keep it up my wetsuit. That's disgusting. No one needs it. So yeah, lots we can do.
Thanks, Corey. The next question, I'm just going to try and combine two into one and see if we can cover it off. It's a question about the Queenscliff boundary, about shifting the Queenscliff boundary to the west. But also, there's also a question about if you were elected, how would you work in partnership with the Borough of the Borough of Queenscliff on key issues that overlap the boundary, whether it's the existing boundary or some desired future boundary. But how do you see you'd work together, and your thoughts on the boundary location between the Borough of Queenscliff and the City of Greater Geelong? Michael Fairweather, please.
That land originally was bought by Irvin Graff from Stocks and Holdings to be part of Colindina and the south side estate. So it was always envisaged that it was part of Geelong. But working with other councils, I think that's what it's all about. It's being part of the area, and the councillors and the employees of Queenscliff would already do work with the people in Geelong Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And Corey Wolverton, please.
Yeah, Queenscliff Council they've declared their climate emergency, and I was pretty jealous of that. So around stuff like environment, that would be amazing. Obviously, they're a part of the Bellarine, and we need to work collaboratively with them around shifting the boundary. Might be not something that we might be able to talk about. If it ever comes up, we might not be able to vote on it. So might leave that one there.
Okay, thanks, Corey. And Trent Sullivan, please.
Yeah, our friends down in the borough are definitely an important part of the Bellarine. On an administrative level, the two councils do work quite closely together to be able to provide joint services to the residents down in the borough. You can just go through the finances of both councils to find the details of that. In regards to Point Lonsdale, it is an interesting situation how we have one half of that community in one municipality and the other in another, as shown by the Point Lonsdale, Queenscliff Point Lonsdale Community Association. They've got to work two councils. Always open to collaboration, always working out. We work with the Borough of Queenscliff in our Geelong Regional Library Corporation, our Tourism Grade Geelong in the Bellarine, G21. We have a lot of good relationships with them, but always happy to work more closely.
Thanks, Trent. And Elise Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, it seems to be a no-brainer really to work closely with Queenscliff Council. I too was very jealous when they managed to kind of get their climate emergency through and take actions on various number of things quite quickly. So there seems to be a progressive and an ease there that may be inspiring and something we could learn from. In relation to town boundaries, I'm not quite clear about how much and what to say about that, but certainly there's a conversation there and something that needs to be explored further.
Thanks, Elise. And Steve Simmons.
Not that familiar with the issue. It's probably a very passionate issue, I'm guessing, and probably actually also an economic issue too, with there'd be quite a bit of rates collected on the Point Lonsdale properties, I'm guessing. But yeah, obviously working closely with Queenscliff is very important. I mean, it's still probably a bit of a mystery as to how they actually avoided amalgamation in the first place. There's certainly, it's a little unique community down there. So I mean, they really are Geelong anyway. So yes, work closely. That's it.
Thanks, Steve. And Jim Mason, please.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, we do have a policy of collaboration and we need to reinforce that. And I won't repeat all the things that have been said with the library and various other services that we share. Hollywood Estate, I remember as a child, and that was part of it in the Geelong side of it. Look, all of that that lakes development is of some concern to people on both sides, and we haven't seen the result yet in terms of the water flow, and we want to see that as the City of Greater Geelong working properly, and it would be really something for Queenscliff to consider very carefully if they wanted to take it over. And of course, there is the effect on Lakers cutting with the water flow there. So there's a lot of issues in terms of the environment that we need to keep in mind. Rates are another thing. The cost of running the borough and the cost of...
Thanks, Jim. And Stephanie Asher, please.
Thank you, Phil. As G21 fellow members, we do have quite a lot to do with Queenscliff, noting also that they are a fraction of the size of the City of Greater Geelong, so decisions and chamber and what happens with their communities aren't really directly comparable to City of Greater Geelong. Actually, as the Mayor met with the Mayor of Queenscliff and their CEO with our CEO to discuss this issue, and as far as I can recall, it's not something that's been resolved at this point, and it's not actually, the boundary issue isn't something that we can really comment on in this forum, but it's certainly a topic of discussion. I know that much.
Thanks, Stephanie. And Tom O'Connor, please. Tom O'Connor. Microphone, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Jim made a good point there before about the finance, the cost of the borough versus the cost of Queenscliff, the rates, services. Is it a retail? What's the purpose of the question? Is it because the retail in Queenscliff and Lonsdale look after those people? Yes, I think it is. How do we marry up the services and the cost of those services? I think that's got to be done. The rubbish for example, that was shared back. I can remember when it was shared back in my time as a councillor. I think there's, it's got to be, it's got to be taken en masse. You just can't go and do it. It's got to be discussed with those residents. It's a big issue. The water, for example, the water coming in and out. How is that going to flood? It's a big issue. I think here I go back again, Phil, to the community, those people that live there.
Thanks, Tom. And Tom Harrison, please.
Yeah, I think it's very important for City of Greater Geelong Council to work collaboratively with all other councils, and in this specific scenario, the Borough of Queenscliff. As far as the zoning, the boundary. Yeah, I don't have too much information on it, and I'm probably not in a position to make comment.
Thanks, Tom. Just quickly, have I missed anybody in that question?
No.
Okay, done well. Thanks, timekeeper in the background. All right, we're going to bounce around a little bit to make sure we get good coverage across the areas as well. So there's a question down here. Will you support the continuation of a full library service in Barwon Heads?
Yes.
Can we start with, hold your phone, Tom. Corey Wolverton, please.
Yeah, Barwon Heads Library obviously has been something that's been spoken about for a little bit of time, and it's super important to Barwon Heads. I know that with my kids, we'd go back and forward to Ocean Grove and Barwon Heads with story time, and they run a great service, and I hope that we can support them as much as we can to make sure that it keeps running to service the community in the way that the community that Barwon Heads expects it does.
Thanks, Corey. And Tom Harrison, please.
Without knowing the finer details, it is something that I'd probably look favourably upon, yes.
Thanks, Tom. And Elise Wilkinson.
Yeah, the Barwon Heads Library is in a unique situation that it's sort of located within the primary school structure. So it does require it requires an agreement to be made, like a written agreement to provide surety for it to remain between the Department of Education and council and the community. It provides an essential service. It's accessible to all people, and it's a safe space. It's not just a bookshelf, it's a connecting point, and it's also an opportunity for you to get access to cutting edge, really up-to-date material, and for the school and for the library to access those resources is essential.
Thanks, Elise. And Stephanie Asher.
Thanks, Phil. Yes, absolutely do support it. And I think I'll probably speak for the other two Bellarine ward councillors to say they would too. I think the three of us joined the library board to ensure that the Barwon Heads Library was protected and saved. So absolutely, yes, do support it. Understand it's a bit of a tricky space, and I did speak to Karen today and Gabrielle about some ideas and providing some options, and at least having a pitch one way or the other to make sure that there is a solution focus, and also that it does make sense, because we all know how important the libraries are to the community. And Barwon Heads is not walkable from Ocean Grove for anybody, so Barwon Heads needs its own community library, definitely. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephanie. Jim Mason, please.
Not much else to say. Sense of community is important, and yes, I was on the library board for 3 years, and we do support the retention of the library as it is, as a shared facility, and that's the way things are going. It was mentioned before, the social infrastructure plans, etc. Sharing facilities will be becoming more and more important, and we just have to work with the education department. The word reviews cropped up here and there. That's just a natural course of action in any project, has to be reviewed from time to time. I don't see anything changing in the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Jim. And Michael Fairweather, please.
I'm an avid reader, and I think everyone should have the opportunity to read as many books as they can and have them as close to their home as possible. So that's a yes for me.
Thank you, Michael. Steve Simmons?
Well, it's a core council function, and we're in a growing, thriving community. So it's a no-brainer that it should stay and thrive and grow, not be disappeared like other libraries.
Thanks, Steve. And finally, Tom O'Connor.
I had a lengthy conversation with the head of the library board 2 days ago about this. Elise nailed it. It's the agreement with the Education Department and Council. That's got to be completed, signed off. And until then, it just goes round and round and round in circles. Pure and simple. That's the only point of difference at this moment. Get it fixed.
Thanks, Tom. Trent, did I miss you?
You did, but I'm happy.
There you go. Sorry. Just making sure I keep you on your toes.
Excellent. Yeah, look, the Barwon Heads is a absolutely vital service. I'm glad that this council was able to save it when it was up in the air a little bit. Currently costs $60,000 per annum to run this specific branch, which is not a high amount whatsoever. But it doesn't need to stay. It's just a drop-off and pick-up service. It deserves to be expanded. I was very proud that we were able to extend the hours of the Drysdale branch. And being able to open the Leopold branch, there's amazing facilities in there. It's not just books, it's not just computers. There's online learning, there's 3D printing. It's extraordinarily educational. These are the same sort of services that Barwon Heads deserve access to as well. Every dollar you invest in libraries, you get $4 worth of benefit in the community. It's not something that should be it doesn't create a profit. It's not a for-profit model. The profit is the community benefit, and that's what we need to maximize.
Thanks, Trent. Have I missed anybody?
No.
No. Good. Thank you. The next question came in earlier in the week, and it's about one of our sometimes forgotten pockets of the Bellarine, and that is what do the candidates see as the two key issues for the Breamlea area? And we start with Steve Simons, please.
Well, I'm not that familiar with any issues down at Breamlea, to be honest. Just like they're possibly not familiar with the issues in Moolap, which is where I live. But obviously it's a very sensitive environment down there. So all the environmental issues would be in play, as would, I'm assuming, also the facilities required for the tourist season. So beyond those two, I can't really comment. But I'm also guessing they probably don't want footpaths.
Thanks, Steve. And Trent Sullivan, please.
Thank you. A big thing we had in the last council was changing ownership of the caravan park down there to Barwon Coast. Better community management, better structure, and as well freed up time for our environmental team. A large issue I've been talking about there is about the local Surf Life Saving Club down there, trying to get a new master plan for that area, create it safer for locals and visitors alike. The environment is very popular down there. Access roads are also extremely popular as well. So there's some of the major issues.
Thanks, Trent. And Tom O'Connor, please.
The Surf Life Saving Club and the caravan park and the very proud group of residents down there. I think that's a little treasure, that part of the world. I wouldn't want to disturb in any way, shape or form. Treat it respectfully. Again, we go back to it all. Talk to the community. Talk to the surf club guys. The caravan park, that was an issue when I was on council. But don't just get in there and tear it apart.
Thanks, Tom. And Michael Fairweather, please.
I agree with Tom. It's an issue that the residents in the area should all be consulted with. It's a lovely area, and it really is. It's a special area for Geelong, and it's the residents that need to make the decisions of what should happen in that area.
Thanks, Michael. And Elise Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, it is a beautiful area. It's and it does get much busier during the tourist season. So managing visitation to the area and the fragile land, the dunes. I know that Point Impossible is a really popular surfing spot, and that gets really busy. There's a lot of work that's been done around revegetation, and so maintaining that. And also, I suppose, the Black Rock treatment plant, as the population increases and the impact on possible waterways and output, and just, really, managing into the future.
Thanks, Elise. And Tom Harrison, please.
Yeah, I think Breamlea's a terrific place. I really do think it's a wonderful part of the world. I don't think it should be the forgotten part. I think they should absolutely have a voice too, and that council should be very attentive in listening to what the people in Breamlea have to say. But yeah, as far as issues are concerned, I don't know off the top of my head what I'd say the two key issues are, but absolutely, we can't forget about Breamlea, and we should definitely listen to the people down there.
Thanks, Tom. And Corey Wolfen, please.
Yeah, just maintaining what it is, which is an easygoing, not overdeveloped place, which is becoming less common on the Bellarine. It's beautiful. Maintaining and caring for the vegetation that exists, and revegetating areas that have had a bit of a rough go, particularly over the sand dunes, and the beautiful environment, how it is. I don't know if anyone went down there, but there was swans and there was baby swans, and that was beautiful. So that's how we want to keep it.
Thanks, Corey. And Stephanie Asher, please.
Phil, I think most of the issues have been mentioned already. I think vaguely recall, because of the quality of the roads down there can be a little bit questionable. They have some dust issues in summer and potholes issues in winter as well. Mozzie control is something else that is a bit of an issue with Breamlea, and definitely the surf club. The Bankura Surf Club is a ripping surf club. I spend most Sunday mornings down there. So absolutely support all the surf lifesaving that goes on, and Breamlea's often forgotten, and Bankura's another little secret gem of a spot. So yep, that's it.
Thanks, Stephanie. Has everyone had their turn on that question? Just to confirm, Jim Mason, please.
Very, very quickly, just to reinforce what's really been said, look after the environment. I think the KISS principle applies here. Keep it simple and secluded. And I think that's community sentiment as well. And that's indicated by the idea that there's not so many footpaths there or post boxes. As we know from those who do pamphleteering, there's no post boxes down there. Anyway, KISS principle, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, thanks, Jim. All done for that question, I think. Yes. All right. Next question is, what plans do you have for disabled members of the community and improving accessibility? And can we start with Tom Harrison, please?
I think that's a very important matter to bring up. I think absolutely the council needs to listen to any suggestions as to improve. Sorry, whereabouts? What question was? Just what was the wording of that question? Sorry.
Okay, just let me roll back up to it. What plans do you have for disabled members of the community and improving accessibility?
Yeah, so in improving accessibility, yeah, I think the council need to be very attentive in listening to suggestions in improving accessibility, and I'm certainly open to hearing anyone's suggestions and representing that on the council. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. And Jim Mason, please.
The council does have policies already on accessibility and inclusivity. We do have to keep monitoring it and finding ways to improve it, such as ramps where there's steps, such as toilets that are easily used by people that are handicapped, by digital access, people who have sight problems. There's a whole range of things that we continue to need to address, and the digital access actually is one of the things that we really haven't addressed properly at the moment.
Thanks, Jim. And Corey Wolverton, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that people with disabilities obviously have a voice at council, and that all programs are inclusive, and that facilities are inclusive, and that the policy and legislation backs that up, and that we are, if there is an issue, that we're quick to make sure that we see that that's fixed up as fast as possible, because we need to be as inclusive as possible, obviously, at all levels of governance.
Great, thanks, Corey. And Tom O'Connor, please.
Jim's right when he says council's got a policy on it. The community care groups do a magnificent job. You know, they're unheralded. You look at people that drive buses, for example, take people around, you know, get them out of their home. Access to the Dell is a classic example. Years ago, I suggested to the golf club, Tom Harrison, that they make golf carts available to take people down to the Dell, disabled people down to the Dell. You could do that. Walk paths, I think we've got to be more cognizant of that. Bellarine Community Health's role, alignment with council and community, and Bellarine Community Health, alignment of their roles and purposes. I think it's to just care for each other. Just got to do it, you know, and it can be done well. And God bless the volunteers who are doing it now.
Thanks,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Thanks, Tom. And Michael Fairweather, please.
I'm surprised the question of footpaths didn't come up again. It's down our way in God's waiting room. It's probably one of the big issues for the elderly and the people in wheelchairs and with access problems. Footpaths are one of the important things. Public transport, that's the other things. The bus lines do support it as much as they can, but we could have better bus stops and things like that down our end of the world as well.
Thanks, Michael. Stephanie Asher, please.
Thanks, Phil. The council actually does have a Disability and Inclusion Advisory Committee. So I think City of Greater Geelong does pretty well in a lot of areas with this, but yep, there's always room for improvement, particularly with education. I think there's quite a host of the NDIS headquarters. There's quite a high level of ignorance in the Geelong community about how to respond to people with disability and how to actually behave, and what we can do to even things up a bit and square it off. I think also we could work better with not only the private sector, but with other levels of government. So things like there's a beautiful concrete pad at the bus stop, but there's no way to get there. So that's council not working with Vic Roads. So you couldn't actually get there with a wheelchair or a pram or anything. And similarly, a lot of restaurants in the waterfront, for example, the footpaths are really great, but the doorways aren't wide enough for a wheelchair to go through. So there's actually a few little blockages that I think should be improved. And I think that Disability and Inclusion Advisory Committee is a really good place to start, but there's always room for improvement.
Thanks. Thank you, Stephanie. And Elise Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Stephanie. Just that collaboration with not only the advisory panel, but more broadly, say Deakin in terms of design elements for the city, so that we're looking at all access, all abilities. There's very practical matters like the footpaths and public transport that Michael suggested, but also playgrounds. There's some really incredible all access playgrounds that exist in Victoria, and just having a look around and seeing what there is, and really looking at our region and our city through the lens of all access, all abilities.
Great, thanks, Elise. And Trent Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, Steph's right. We do have the Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee at Council, and they do have their plan for 2018 to 2022. It covers a range of issues. Starts very from the top to the bottom, you know, upholding the human rights, identifying and addressing discrimination, installing sense of inclusion and community within our otherly abled community, you know, make sure we have accessible transport and a community that is designed for people. At least right in terms of all ables playgrounds. We were able to have the new one in Rippleside Park, one of the largest playgrounds in the municipality, is redone to include all abilities. That's a fantastic start that we can replicate down here on the Bellarine to make sure nobody has to drive across or even outside of our ward to access a right that everybody should have within our municipality. Footpaths, you know, very basic right. We need to get that right, but that's something we're always pushing uphill. And public toilets, I'm extraordinarily disappointed in the state of public toilets across the Bellarine, especially disabled public toilets as well. It is not right. They're not good enough. Facilities aren't there.
Thanks, Trent. And Steve Selmans, please.
I'm not sure I have many solutions to the problem, but I'd have more questions as to why these issues are even still issues these days. I mean, we've been dealing with this for like accessibility and ramps and for 30, 40 years. And obviously there are legislative requirements for builders or councils or just all community facilities, really. So my question is, why hasn't it all been implemented and being improved year on year? And I'm just guessing it comes down to cost. So it's not one without the other.
Thanks, Steve. Have I missed anybody?
No.
No. Thanks, background voice. Take a broader view on this next question. It's back to the two issues question, but it's about what do you see as the two biggest issues confronting the Bellarine as a whole? We'll start with Elise, please.
I think I mentioned it, you know, I talked about it at the beginning, is really, really keeping it as distinctive and beautiful as it is. So really looking at careful management of visitation and development, and really allowing and telling the stories and the importance of the heritage of the area, and that includes the Aboriginal heritage and the stories that are so vital in really in attracting tourism. We're about to have the ferry come in from the Spirit of Tasmania. There's going to be this huge increase in terms of people being able to access through Avalon. And so we really need to be ready. We need to look at infrastructure, and we need to look at protecting this unique part of the world.
Thanks, Elise. Michael Fairweather, please.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm very lucky to be in Portarlington, which is a fairly small community. It's a joy walking down the street and just seeing smiling faces and talking to people when we can. These days with the masks, you can't see whether they're smiling or not. But it is, we are privileged. The small communities down here are great, and they should be looked after to keep them that way. That doesn't stop growth, because we do need growth. You become stagnant if you stop, but controlled growth is very important.
Michael, thank you. Jim Mason.
Very difficult question to keep the beautiful, pristine Bellarine economically sustainable. And we do have our rural breaks, and we do have to keep those rural breaks sustainable. And therefore we do have to contain the boundaries, and we do have to ensure that who is operating in these rural areas is really understanding how to look after that wonderful heritage that we have. Now, there's also tourism, which is a vexing problem, because there's an optimum size of business, optimum number of businesses. And we really don't want, I think the general community sentiment is, we don't want too much traffic jamming up the whole Bellarine. So the sooner we get the Bellarine link finished, the better, or started and finished. So a lot of the through traffic from the ferries can go straight through. How's my minute going? I can't see any timer, but anyway.
There it is. There you go, Jim. Corey Wolverton, please.
Yeah, so caring for the rural landscapes and the coast and our waterways, ensuring that the vegetation's looked after, and there's plenty of other places that have been doing the coastal rural food and wine much longer than we have, and we can learn stacks from them. It doesn't just have to be in Victoria; it's in other states as well, and that comes down to coming out of COVID, assisting with recovery, ensuring that well-being is looked after, cafes, businesses, that the culture of the place, that people are feeling supported, that young people are feeling supported, that bars and music and the things that we love, particularly over summer, that's going to be there, and we can help and we can support to do that.
Thank you. Tom Harrison, please.
I suppose two of the issues I see is the biggest facing the Bellarine would be managing population growth, making sure that as the population grows, we're preserving the environment and the character and amenity of the area. I think as well, a major issue will be a post-COVID recovery. So that'll include the need to support local business and encourage regional economic growth, and down here on the Bellarine, supporting local cafes, restaurants, the tourism industry as well. I presume that's set to boom, I'd say, when restrictions begin to ease further. But yeah, I think post-COVID recovery and managing population growth while preserving the natural environment and the character of the region. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And Stephanie Asher, please.
Thank you, Phil. I think everybody's expressed the same thing in a different way, which is really, really good. We're all on the same message. And I think it's that balancing the protection of our lifestyle and our environment while also allowing for a prosperous economy. And that's always going to be two competing interests, apparently, and two tensions. And it is that getting the land management right with also the infrastructure needs. We want to protect the landscape, but everybody wants to go to the supermarket or the shops or have the things that they want. So it is very much in the local government realm to actually take control of that and understand how to best do that. Needs long-term thinking, and we need to measure our impacts. The only way we can manage them is measure them, which is the core part of the sustainability framework and action plan. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. And Steve Simons, please.
We have to slow down growth and also recognise that we are part of the whole of Geelong. So other parts of Geelong can sustain growth much more than the Bellarine can. So I think we can slow down dramatically the growth on the Bellarine. It doesn't have to be a growth at all cost situation or growth and going stagnant, because the rest of Geelong can grow as much as they like, because we are risking losing the beauty of the Bellarine. And Breamlea is a perfect example, because I guess Breamlea is how I sort of remember much of the Bellarine, whether it was ocean grove land, sand dunes in my childhood and the like. And then, of course, action on climate change, just to actually real action. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. And Tom O'Connor, please.
I'd go back to the policy objectives and strategies, Phil, in the Bellarine localised planning statement. Start off with a common goal. What is it we want? Do we want to protect, preserve and enhance the quality of life on the Bellarine? Yes, we do. That's all encased in those policy objectives and strategies. The other one is the rates on rural properties. I'd look very closely at reducing those rates on the rural properties. I think some of those fellas are being done in the eye, and I would bring recycled water onto the Bellarine to encourage the farming community to stay there. It's about the look, the feel, and the function. How do we want to do it? The other one, dare I say it, I'd put a toll gate up by Christie's Road on Portarlington Road, and toll anybody that wanted to come in. But smile at them and take their money. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. All right. That gets us through a lot of the questions, not all.
Trent Sullivan.
Sorry, Trent, have I missed you? Oh, that's twice.
Oh, twice, thrice. Who's counting?
Okay.
If I may.
Trent, you're on mute now.
There we go. Excellent. Thanks, Phil. My two largest events, or issues with the Bellarine, or what I've said, would have been planning and the environment. Planning such as town boundaries, population growth, housing density and heights, environment for rural restorations, green breaks, likes of that. However, we do have the overarching COVID recovery facing us down. Luckily, we do have the distinctive areas and landscapes to take care of planning environment, and the passing of C395, which not only identifies north and growth corridors and near Lara and outside of Geelong as the growth areas, it diverts all future Bellarine growth that way. So we're protected on two fronts there. In terms of COVID recovery, you know, tourism events, arts and culture, the Bellarine thrives on the two heavily hit industries for the COVID shutdown. So the council needs to lead initiatives to pump that up as much as possible without sacrificing social infrastructure and community services.
Thanks, Trent. Right, no one missed their chance on that one? Good, okay. So for the attendees that have hung in there, those questions that didn't get answered that came up in the Q&A tab and other questions that came in will be sent to each of the candidates, and we will ask them to respond, and the answers will be published without names in terms of who asked the question on the various community association websites over the next week. The final wrap up is each candidate has 1 minute to close out. And we'll start with Trent Sullivan, please.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so thank you to the combined community associations for organising this. Two fantastic panels. Thank you to all my candidates and everybody else watching at home as well. It's spectacular. I've had the pleasure of 3 years of public service. It's been a fantastic learning curve. I've been able to believe we get a lot done with the community, but there's a lot more I want to tick off the list. The job is never done. There's always more. I promise I was listening to my community. I promise to fight as hard as I can the budget. You know, I know what's going on. I know what's going forward. I know how the finances within council work now. I'm prepared to fight as hard as I can every day to make sure we get the proper resource allocation for the Bellarine and recovery program that we're going to need for the next 4 years going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Trent. And Tom O'Connor, please.
I'll go back on the 3 key steps. The townships and the villages develop the vision and mission relating to, as well as their relationship to the marine, the coastal, the future elements, develop the priorities, the partners and the budgets, and then finish up, construct a plan for the Bellarine. And it's about us, the community, taking the initiative. We've got to guide it. We councillors have got to guide it. Take the initiative and share the workload with council. Don't inflict the workload on council. They need a lot of help. There's a lot of stuff happening and a lot of stuff got to happen, and it covers a vast area. We're going to take a greater share of the initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And Steve Simmons, please.
I think my views are fairly well put out there now, so I'll just leave it up to everyone else to decide. I'm going to have trouble choosing my second and third and fourth and fifth preferences. Everyone's been great, and thanks for the forums, Phil. So yeah.
Thanks, Steve. And Tom Harrison, please.
Yeah, thank you, Phil, and everyone involved in putting on this event. It's been very enjoyable, both webinars, and yeah, thank you very much for that. But yep, I'm absolutely passionate about my community. I love where I live. I love the Bellarine, and I think a big thing is community engagement. And I like to think of myself as a people person, and I just look forward to getting in amongst the community, hearing what matters to the community and their concerns, and acting in accordance to their best interests. So I just want to wish all the other candidates all the best, and yeah, look forward to hopefully seeing you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. And Stephanie Asher, please.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, everybody, particularly my fellow candidates. It's been really good getting to know you all. I offer 3 years councillor experience, including as mayor and leader of the council through the COVID crisis, and I understand now how to get things done. And there are a number of things that need pushing in this next budget process, particularly to make sure that they do stay on track. And I'd really like to be there to get that to happen. As the mayor, I was able to drive better communication from council and help move the reputation of Geelong away from a focus on the CBD. And if re-elected, I'll continue to focus on better processes, better communication and higher standards within council, including listening to the community and responding to the local issues. I think the big issues for the region are employment and managing growth, and the issues for our community are infrastructure, protecting our environment and lifestyle. Thank you.
Stephanie. And Corey Wolverton, please.
Thank you to the community associations for putting you on. Thanks to all the candidates. Everyone spoke really well. I've done a few of these, and yeah, everyone's very impressive. And thanks to the attendees that have stayed on. I think we've got a real shot right now. It's a pivotal moment in time. The climate crisis and a COVID recovery. We have a chance to make a real difference and to be innovative and care for our community, care for its well-being, and also protect and care for the environment. So with that, I think that I'd do a good job and be honest and hardworking and do exactly that. So thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks, Corey. And Jim Mason, please.
Thank you, Phil, and all the members of the combined Bellarine Community Association for your dedication and community service, for running this excellent forum and for working so nicely with us and over the last 3 years. And thanks also to all the candidates. It takes courage and energy and personal resources to take this on, and commitment to community. It's been good to work with you over this short period. If elected, I'll continue to put in. There's a lot more to do. We need to be shovel ready to seize opportunities, to make loud noises for the implementation of the Bellarine bypass, especially now during COVID recovery stimulus opportunities. I want to do more to protect our towns and environment, make more improvements to sporting, social and city services, especially in aged and childcare, social housing, mental health, and targeted COVID relief. We need stronger climate and biodiversity policies and targets. And
thanks, Jim. And Elise Wilkinson, please.
Thanks, Phil. And yeah, thank you so much to all of the combined associations for pulling this together and being so innovative in adapting to a virtual forum. We're facing great challenges. We are at a vital crossroads at the moment. We're emerging from a pandemic, and we are facing environmental disaster. So I suppose I'm here because I was inspired by my children to actually stand up and do everything I can to sort of make change and be a leader within that. So it's really fantastic to actually have the opportunity to talk about the environment and to talk about the urgency of being able to address the issues that face the Bellarine. I'm really excited. I love where I live. I am really excited about the expertise and goodwill that is out in the community and incredible.
Elise, thank you. And Michael Fairweather, please. Unmute, Michael.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks for all the hard work that you've done. If I'm elected, I'll make sure that I'm available to hear and talk with all my fellow residents and act not only for Portarlington, but for the whole of the Bellarine. I'll endeavour to keep everyone informed and try and assist everyone where I can. I think the issues that we've got down here are tourism and lifestyle and security and safety. And all of these things need good council direction. Thanks, Phil. And thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks, Michael. Now, have I missed anybody in the wrap?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Thank you. Look, in closing up, on behalf of the combined Bellarine Community Associations who hosted and funded this webinar and the webinar on Monday night, thank you for joining, and we hope this was helpful to you all in making your decisions in voting. To the candidates, thank you for your participation tonight and on Monday night, and for your personal commitment to our communities in standing for election as a councillor in the Bellarine ward. A reminder, a link for the recording of the webinar will be available in a couple of days on our websites. Thank you, good night, and please leave the meeting. For members of the Combined Bellarine Association, please stay on board.
Thank you, everyone.